A mansion in New Mexico that belonged to the late Jeffrey Epstein is set to be investigated after renewed interest from state officials. The 30,000 square foot property is known as Zorro Ranch and is located about 30 miles south of Santa Fe. And it was owned by Epstein from 1993 until his death in 2019.
The New York Times published a piece on Zorro Ranch Sunday, which says, in part, New Mexico leaders say there's never been a thorough investigation of the criminal activity that may have occurred at the ranch during the 26 years the convicted sex offender owned it. The state-led inquiry into Mr. Epstein's actions was taken over by federal prosecutors in 2019 and then apparently fizzled, according to New Mexico officials and recently unsealed records. Last month, lawmakers in New Mexico, spurred by the Justice Department's release of the Epstein documents, voted unanimously to change that, impaneling a bipartisan four-member Truth Commission in the state legislature equipped with subpoena power to probe the sordid history of Zorro Ranch. The state's attorney general also announced he would reopen an investigation his office had closed shortly before Mr. Epstein's death in 2019. Speculation about possible criminal activity taking place on the ranch has continued for years, but as of now, there's no concrete proof. Some of Epstein's victims have said they were trafficked there, and there was even an anonymous tip from someone claiming to have worked at the ranch who said Epstein concealed the deaths of two girls by having them buried near the property.
The ranch now has new ownership, which could potentially make an investigation a little more difficult. But following the New York Times report, the calls for a full investigation are growing louder. Representative Thomas Massie, you knew he was going to jump in on this. He's the co-author of the Epstein Files Transparency Act, writes, quote, investigate Zorro Ranch as well as the men and women at DOJ and FBI who shut this part of the Epstein investigation down. Also, the Epstein Files Transparency Act requires DOJ to release memos and emails detailing their decisions of whether to investigate and or prosecute. And California Governor Gavin Newsom says from his press office official account, quote, totally unacceptable. Trump appears to have squashed a key piece of investigating Epstein.
I love that Gavin Newsom just says things that are totally made up and have no backing in truth, and he feels like he can do that. We have no idea or knowledge that Trump ended this investigation personally, or that ending it was improper. Could be the investigation ended because it didn't find anything. The idea that it's covering up, did Trump ever go to this ranch? Did anyone ever go to this ranch? I mean, we're just making up things. This is why you said, after Trump testifies, then it's over. No, it isn't, because Thomas Massie says we have to investigate not only the ranch, which was already investigated, but then we have to investigate the investigators for not investigating it hard enough. You see how this will never be over? Then we'll have to investigate the people who investigated the investigators because they didn't find anything. You see this, it's both ways. It never ends. Because when there's no evidence, that's just evidence that the evidence is buried even deeper and we need to look for it harder. The theory is non-falsifiable at this point. If you find something, they're right. If you don't find something, they're right. We just have to keep looking. I don't know what to do with this. I mean, okay. I say that, but okay, by all means, subpoena people, look into it. I guess I don't care. I'm not standing in your way of doing that. It sounds like it belongs to someone else. I guess you gotta knock on their door and say, hey, can we search your property for the bodies of two dead people who an anonymous tip claimed? That could be totally made up. That could be accurate. Usually missing people are sometimes reported missing, and there'd be some reason to think who their identities are, who's missing. Just makes me think it's just made up, but I don't know. What am I supposed to say?
One of the great things...
It's never over. It's never over, Lindsay. You know it's never over.
No, I think what you want to talk about the sex trafficking charges specifically, and that's the part that you want to be done with in regard to the president and other leadership. And I told you when he's deposed and we release the rest of the files, perhaps we can put that to
against him.
Perhaps we can put that to bed for you. What I'm happy about is to see that because of what Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna have done, again, I want to reiterate to anyone who doesn't know full clear, Thomas Massie is a Republican, have pushed forward with. A lot of stuff is coming out of this. If Prince Andrew needs to get arrested, former Prince Andrew, because of some illegal activity he was doing financially, so be it. Let me finish. If a ranch needs to get investigated because there potentially could have been some misconduct there tied to deaths or anything having to do with a man that was convicted of prostitution of minors in 2008 and charged with sex trafficking, so be it. I'm not showing sympathy for people investigating wrongdoing by somebody that's deceased or alive. There are real victims that still want answers. Somebody might be looking for the possible dead body that is there and never found their loved one. And so therefore I don't see any problem with new investigation coming out of this. If you want to put to bed that specific part, I'm happy to be on board with you. If there's no cabal, there's no cabal. But I do not want to put together all things around Jeffrey Epstein because you're exhausted of it, or anyone is exhausted of it. There's a lot to look into here. Most importantly for you and for a lot of other people is the foreign intelligence connection. Other crimes that may have been committed. Everybody should go to jail if they committed a crime in relation to a known criminal. And that's it. I don't have a problem if this takes years or months or weeks to figure out who was committing criminal activity in Jeffrey Epstein's world. Why does that bother you?
Because of the presumption of innocence. And at some point, we have to assume, as we should for President Trump, that he is not guilty of anything. He's not even accused of anything. He's not even connected to anything. What does a financial transactions investigation in England have to do with us or have to do with Trump? It has nothing to do with anything. It doesn't matter to me. I don't care. I don't care.
One person tried to
would not
connect
have
New
released
Mexico
our
to Trump.
investigative files because of their ambassador and their former prince doing questionable financial things. Has nothing to do with whether we unseal our records.
Jeffrey Epstein was allowed to parade around with impunity for years. If he was committing financial crimes alongside other people, we should know about it.
You say that, but he went to jail.
Yeah, for a very short
they
time for
charged him again.
for the crime that he was committed, and then somebody, or he allegedly, or they confirmed commit suicide. But then I saw the CBS report that they saw an orange figure, according to these released Epstein files, near or around his.
The reason the deal, his initial prosecution, and the sweetheart deal, and the reason it seems, in hindsight, in retrospect, now knowing the full extent of his depravity, it seems far too light, and I agree that it was far too light, obviously, is because there wasn't compelling evidence against him at the time, because none of these so-called victims would testify against him back then. None of them would testify that he knew that they were underage. What they said is that they lied to him and said that they were over 18. For the most part. One, again, she didn't say she was sex trafficked or abused or raped or mistreated anyway, but she did say that he knew she was only 17. So that's what he went down for. The rest of them didn't say anything.
May I ask you something?
Okay.
How many coincidences do you allow before you say, well, I want to investigate that? There are too many coincidences here that make this whole investigation worth looking into. I just told you that we're told Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide, but CBS released a report from compiled documents releasing these Epstein files, and there was a figure, it looked like, and documented near or around his jail cell. But he was supposed to be in there alone. But it was an orange-looking figure, like somebody who wears a jumpsuit from jail. This is alarming evidence that's coming out of this release. There's a lot of information that's coming out of this release that's getting swept under the rug because we are bombarded with news every single day. I mean, just this week alone, a war. But that doesn't mean there's not relevant information that's going to take time and thoroughness to fully investigate. And I think that down the line, we're going to find out a lot of information. Perhaps, but not only having to do with sex trafficking, but a lot of other crimes that were committed. And I don't have a problem with Congress, whose job is oversight, taking the time out to figure out what all those crimes were to avoid them happening again.
I think this is a desperate effort to indict our president for something where there's not a shred of evidence he did.
Why do you keep tying it back? Looking at this New Mexico...
That's what Gavin Newsom did.
Yeah, Gavin Newsom is not the end-all, be-all. Looking at this New Mexico home has nothing to do with President Trump. Gavin Newsom wants to have something to do with President Trump because Gavin Newsom's running for president. So he obviously wants everything to do with Trump.
So he said they didn't look... So this House was investigated, and Gavin Newsom already knows that investigation was inadequate and was done inadequately on purpose to cover for Trump because it's a major piece in the puzzle for connecting Epstein to Trump. That's what he said in the tweet. He said it in the tweet.
Gavin Newsom has a problem with
Trump. And that's a lie.
Gavin Newsom and Trump have a problem with each other.
I have a problem
with that has nothing to do with the rest of the world and the victims that want answers about Epstein. They can go ahead and do that dog and pony show on Instagram and X all day.
I'm with
There's other people that actually want
information. When Hillary Clinton was taking these questions, and she was like, she was like, look, if you have an email that shows that I ever talked to Epstein or ever visited the island, then show it to me.
Pull it up.
I'd pull it up. Good for her. And I'd say the same for Trump. Trump should say to them, if you have an email, any evidence that I was ever at this ranch in Santa Fe, show it to me.
So hopefully he's deposed on tape and then we can hear him say that and we'll be done with it, yeah?
And then we'll be done with it.
Yeah.
But we'll never be done with it. This will never end. Do you honestly think this is ever going to end?
What's that saying about? I'm never mind. Let's move on.
I think this is.
I think we're done with the
I
conversation
think the
here.
circus has
It's
taken
not a circus.
has
And
taken it on
I
the
didn't mean to
road.
laugh because
The
I'm more
juggler and
laughing
the
at how
bearded
far
lady
we've gotten
and
from the
the-
core of this, which is that victims and people really want answers. And I hope that through this long and probably drawn out investigation that spurs off into a
People
bunch of
don't
other
want answers.
investigations,
I disagree
we
with
get
you.
answers. I
They
don't.
want
disagree.
the answers that they already have arrived at in their heads. They want evidence of answers that they have independently reached, in many cases for partisan motivation. Democrats, Ro Khanna, Gavin Newsom have their answer is that Donald Trump was sexually abusive toward underage girls. That's the answer they have. They already have the
Thomas
answer.
Massey's answer?
So they're continuing
So what's
this.
Thomas Massey, the Republican, who's also
I've already said I
co-chair
disagree
of
with
this?
what he's doing.
Yeah, but what's his motivation then if it's not getting Trump?
Well, he's not on good terms with Trump
Protecting
either.
victims. That's his motivation.
I don't know him. I agree with most of his policies. I think he sincerely believes. I think he's been.
So why can't
taken
any
in-
Democrats sincerely believe the same thing as Thomas Massey, particularly Ro Khanna? Why can't that be true?
Because I'm reading their tweets, and it's about
Gavin
Trump.
Newsom's not part of this investigation. Ro Khanna, yes, I agree with you, made the mistake of going on the House floor and naming people that were
the
innocent.
mistakes are really
but
adding
it's
up.
been months and months of investigations and redacted files and lack of information from the FBI and DOJ.
Lack of
and he
information
made a
verifying
mistake.
that Trump is criminally indicated. That is the information we don't have. So the investigation will continue until that information, which doesn't exist, is found. So it will go on forever. That's what Democrats are telling you. That's what Democrats are telling you they're going to do. Is investigate this forever until they get Trump.
There was a recent
It's Russiagate.
accusation.
It's the exact same thing as Russiagate. It will continue until there's a smoking gun that Trump spoke to Russia about how to hack the Hillary's emails or the DNC or the voting machines or Facebook or whatever it is. That evidence will be sought until it's found.
There
It'll never be
is
found,
an
it'll always be sought.
existing, uncorroborated accusation that's very problematic surrounding President Trump out there right now. And so they're asking why it was redacted. We talked about it a couple of days ago.
Because it's false.
But it's still uncorroborated and still an accusation that the FBI received that they redacted. But they didn't do that with any other figures, and people want to know why was Trump left out of this?
My accusation that Lindsay
No,
is
stop
a
using
visitor
me. You always
from the
say
planet
this.
Mars
you always-
has not been properly investigated. It's not
Every
been
day it's
investigated to my
something different.
satisfaction. I want the DOJ
I'm not
on
the
this
president,
now.
and if you put that forward,
need answers.
I would be as confident as Hillary and say, show the proof.
We need answers.
So Trump should just go up there and be as confident as Hillary and say, show the proof, pull up the email.
I will not rest until this investigation uncovers the evidence for the thing I firmly believe and have no evidence for. CNN staffers are reportedly concerned over Paramount potentially taking over Warner Brothers Discovery.
Last Thursday, Netflix pulled out of the bidding war for Warner Brothers after Warner said Paramount's bid was, quote, superior. News outlet Variety writes in part, CNN employees are, quote, devastated by the news of the Paramount deal, says one of these people. Quote, no one is happy, says a second. There's a palpable dread among staffers, these people say. And NBC News reported a similar sentiment describing the situation in part. Quote, one CNN journalist who regularly appears on air described Netflix pullback as shocking. The journalist said they believe some staffers would head for exits if faced with the prospect of working for David Ellison or CBS News editor-in-chief Barry Weiss, whom Ellison hired to, quote, invigorate the storied network news division.
Of course, many on the left have lamented Weiss being installed as editor-in-chief of CBS, saying she has right-of-center views and is adamantly pro-Israel. Oh no, not that. Paramount offered to buy Warner Brothers for $31 per share, total value being $111 billion, including debt. Netflix declined to raise its proposal, and its co-CEO said in a statement at the time, we believe we would have been strong stewards of Warner Brothers' iconic brands. Netflix's co-CEOs Ted Sarandos and Greg Peters said in a joint statement, but this transaction was always a nice to have at the right price, not a must have at any price.
That quote was always my favorite because Netflix was like, it's like if you're dating somebody, you're like, oh, I liked you, but it wasn't that serious. Okay, so I'll start from the part that makes me sad. I was excited to see how Netflix runs a media entity this way. We've seen how it's run by traditional outlets that have existed in this capacity for years. Netflix has shaken up the game so much that the way that they would run a major news network or other things was really exciting to me to see. And I was excited about the potential of someone new or a new type of entity owning a new type of company. That likely is not happening. I think the other concerns from a lot of employees are just you're overlapping two similar companies. So eventually there's going to be tons of layoffs.
Well,
More than,
that was gonna happen either way.
but Netflix doesn't have the infrastructure already built in to have these things exist already. Like Warner Brothers already has a lot of this infrastructure. You don't need like two of the same
Well,
things
Netflix
mirroring.
owning the same thing as HBO would have been. I mean, this is another streaming. It was a very similar streaming service.
Yeah, I think
That would
HBO
have been odd to me, but
maybe, but HBO, I loved HBO back in the day. It has changed a little bit, but it
it's a
still
streaming
is.
service
Yeah,
like Netflix.
it's still strong. I think the news division part they didn't own one, and so it would be interesting to see what they do there. We kind of understand what David Ellison wants to do with his news-owned properties. We saw the transition through CBS. As I said on the show, I was interested to see what Barry Weiss would do because as a business executive and somebody who has shown growth in a time where news is slowly declining or rapidly, depending on how you look at it, she has built from the ground up something that mirrors what old journalism used to look like, is just allowing reporters to go out and cover stories that a variety of people care about and get consumers to read directly in your content. And so she brought that to Paramount and hopefully will enhance the newsroom. I know there's been a lot of criticism. People at CNN are like, well, if we have to report through some kind of lens, that kind of changes what we do here, because we don't want that type of guidance. And some people would argue CBS
Well,
already
yeah,
has
I
that
mean,
guidance.
this is all speculative at this point because we don't know that CNN is going to be put under Barry Weiss's purview. It's CNN and CBS are kind of competing. Like what kind of consolidation? Maybe consolidation is appropriate because people are not watching TV in the same way. They're getting most of their news and information from YouTube, from streaming, from social media. So maybe legacy media brands do need to consolidate in order to stay relevant in the way that, BuzzFeed and Huffington Post both used to be huge sources of news and web traffic during the 2010s, and then due to changes in Facebook's algorithm and other things, that's not a viable business model, and they had to merge, and they're still not doing well. So this is just what happens. This was a financial decision. Netflix wanted to acquire it, was not willing to acquire it at that price. If it had been government pressure, because the Ellisons are closer to Trump, even though he got mad at them recently, then that would be bad. But it sounds like it's a corporate thing. That's a better deal, and so that's what they're going with. And so what can I say? But we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. A lot of regulation they're gonna have to push through.
Yeah.
And I'm also still sad about Netflix. I think they just would have done a cooler. At the very least, they would have made news a little cooler.
You ever forget which thing is on? Like we're watching Mad Men right now, and I was looking for it on Netflix, and I'm like, no, wait, I'm watching on HBO. You forget these things.
Yes.
Big night in Texas. Primary ballots poured in to determine who will be the Democrat and Republican nominees for the Senate in the midterm elections this November, and a bunch of other races, too, of interest. Now, on the GOP side, incumbent Senator John Cornyn and challenger State Attorney General Ken Paxton will be heading to a runoff election in May. By all accounts, it's expected to be an expensive and a dirty fight for the nomination.
But the big news of the night came from the Democrats, where State Representative James Talarico beat Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett to secure his party's nomination for Cornyn's Senate seat. But leading up to the primary, it wasn't clear that we would see results on election night. The state Supreme Court handed down an emergency decision yesterday, reversing a lower court's ruling that extended early voting hours in Dallas County. That came after a last-minute voting change in the Republican primary caused confusion and led to some Democratic voters showing up to the wrong polling location. As a result of that confusion, a Dallas County judge ordered polling places to stay open 2 more hours to give voters a chance to cast their ballots. But the state's high court overturned that, saying that any votes cast by the voters not in line by 7 p.m. should be separated. That ruling ultimately sparked allegations of voter suppression. Both Talarico and Crockett spoke out against that ruling last night. Take a listen.
This is what Republicans like to do.
They cheat all the time.
And so they specifically targeted Dallas County, and I think we all know why.
The voter suppression in my home county and in Congresswoman Crockett's home county underscores the gravity of this moment.
The ruling is temporary while the changes that caused the confusion are challenged in court. Voters who arrived late cast provisional ballots, and it's still unclear whether they'll ultimately be counted.
Despite that, the primary race was called late last night for Talarico, who secured about 53% of the vote, according to Decision Desk HQ. Crockett received just over 45%. Here was Talarico speaking to a watch party crowd just before the call was made.
We are not just trying to win an election. We are trying to fundamentally change our politics. And it's working. Tonight, the people of our state gave this country a little bit of hope. And a little bit of hope is a dangerous thing.
In the hours after the race was called, Democrats flocked to get behind their new Senate nominee, Texas Congressman Greg Casar, writing on X, James Talarico is the future of the Democratic Party. He unites working people of all kinds to take on the billionaires who are making life unaffordable. He's going to show Texas Republicans how powerful working people are when we stand together. Just this morning, Congresswoman Crockett conceded the race and called for party unity. Quote, Texas is primed to turn blue, and we must remain united because this is bigger than any one person. She said in a statement, with the primary behind us, Democrats must rally around our nominees and win.
Now, Mehdi Hassan echoing that cautious optimism, writing on X, Dems may have a chance in Texas in November. I think last night was the first moment of truth. You know, we have a long stretch of primaries coming up. I was looking at the schedule and the dates, like, okay. But, you know, we have a really opportunity. I think there's a big opportunity for Democrats because Republicans are now in disarray. I think for Paxton, having another election is probably his worst nightmare. For Cornyn, this was a great thing because he knew that he wasn't having the support that he needed from the young MAGA base and from some newer Republicans, but he knows that the establishment supported him, and he's going to keep having money poured into his campaign, which will make this a really dirty dirty race. Ken Paxton has a lot of stuff that could go against him, and it could get really messy. We know that he's in a really bad divorce. We know that he has some allegations against him. So all this could come out with campaign spending. It could really get sloppy while Democrats have a firm candidate, Talarico, that can continually be propelled up. I mean, this man's a former school teacher. He's the person that took on the measured, balanced approach toward politics. He appeals to those independents for this general election and the people that maybe don't know which side of the aisle they fall on, that like President Trump's policies a little bit, but don't like his personality or the way that he behaves sometimes. So Talarico is going to continue to build on this momentum, and Republicans are going to keep fighting over the seat.
Yeah, look, Texas is a red state, so this is going to be a difficult one to pick up. Talarico is going to have to do like 6 points better than the typical Democratic nominee, or I mean, he has to make it up some way. He could do 3 points better, and the Republican does 3 points worse. You know, same difference. Yes, Democrats, I think, have set themselves up for success by saying no to Jasmine Crockett, who I think was going to have a very hard time statewide. And James Talarico looks like he might, his views are not, frankly, that moderate, but he comes across as a moderate or reassuring. I mean, you know, race plays into that a little bit. On the GOP side, you know, John Cornyn, the embattled incumbent, actually had a better night than I expected. Now, a good night would have been clearing the 50% threshold and winning outright and having no runoff, because there's 3 candidates in this race. Wesley Hunt.
Yeah, Wesley Hunt jacked it up for both of them.
Right, he got like
13% of the vote.
But most of Wesley Hunt's voters, their second choice is disproportionately Ken Paxton. So when it goes down to 2 of them, it is not clear that John Cornyn is going to win that. In fact, I would still say he's something of an underdog here. But what this means, because he finished first, if Ken Paxton had won this outright, even without getting 50% of the vote, Donald Trump was going to sweep in and was going to endorse Ken Paxton. Ken Paxton is the MAGA candidate. MAGA loves him. Turning Point USA endorsed him. He has a good relationship with Trump people. So he's courting. Trump has not weighed in. But this keeps Trump at bay because it's not clear. Trump doesn't want to endorse someone who's not going to go on to win. He would, you know, I'm sure his advisors are telling him, like, we could really, like, control of the Senate could hang in the balance of this race. I'm sure his advisors are telling him, and he's agreeing, no matter how much you might like Ken Paxton, we can't lose control of the Senate. So right. I'm sure they would rather John Cornyn be the nominee. But if Paxton's going to win the nomination, Trump wants to endorse him and get behind him and keep this and full-throatedly help and get him to defeat Talarico. This keeps it ambiguous enough that I see the White House sitting it out again for now, and that's, again, a win by default for Cornyn.
But also for President Trump, you know, it's a decision between, like, your ego, or if you want to jump in, if he preferred Paxton and doesn't really love Cornyn, if he doesn't get involved, you're right, then I don't know that he'd want to do that to the detriment of his own party moving forward.
Yeah. It doesn't sound like he dislikes John Cornyn. John Cornyn has not been, I get he's perceived as not being MAGA-y enough because he's not as, like, bombastic, and he doesn't have like very significant policy or even disagreements with Trump. If you compare to someone else who lost their primary, it was Dan Crenshaw, who is a kind of prominent Republican who has criticized Trump a little bit, is more of an old school Bush, John McCain neocon. He got crushed in his primary. He's gone. He's done. So John Cornyn isn't quite in that camp, I think.
And I think what Texas showed us is a larger picture, perhaps, for the appetite or the Democratic Party going forward. I think if we balance and look at what happened in New York and look at what happened in Texas, there's still a big, stark divide between what two dramatically different parts of the country want, like Mamdani or somebody way more moderate, Talarico.
Speaking of endorsements that didn't pan out, Kamala Harris, of course, had made her last-minute endorsement of Jasmine Crockett. Not enough.
Well, let me tell you what,
Jasmine over the line.
I didn't know if that endorsement was actually that relevant, because in 2020, Democrats made major strides in Texas, which has started to get this energy that Texas could possibly turn blue one day.
You don't want to
wait, let me finish. In 2024, when Kamala ran, they fell back from the progress they had made. So I don't know that Kamala was that popular specifically in Texas.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Kamala's the kiss of death.
So I don't know. That's why I said I don't know that she would want that endorsement. And when everybody was like, yeah, Kamala jumped in too little too late, I was kind of like, well, she could have probably just...
Well, right. It would have been nice for Kamala if then Jasmine Crockett won and she could say, I helped get her over the line. I'm still relevant and important. I should be the presidential candidate. Didn't really pan out that way, Kamala. Sorry about that.
Sean Hannity threw some shade at Tucker Carlson in a recent episode of the Katie Miller podcast.
Hannity sat down with Stephen Miller's wife on Tuesday, and the two discussed Hannity's former Fox colleague, Tucker Carlson. Let's listen.
Ever. I mean, I wish him well. I've read a lot of what he says. I just completely disagree with it, and it's not the person that I knew when he was at Fox.
Miller then asked Hannity for his take on the growing infighting among conservative media personalities, and here was that response.
And I've stayed out of it, if you've noticed.
You have.
That's by design. To me, the big fight in this country is against the radical left. And they all want to kill each other. My interest in involving myself in it is zero. I don't believe my success is predicated on tearing somebody else down or their failure.
Hannity went off on the mainstream media, saying the difference between me and them, I also say I'm a conservative, and I'll tell you who I'm going to vote for. Hannity then slammed CNN's Jake Tapper, calling him a fake journalist.
Hannity also offered his predictions about President Trump's 2028 run, saying, quote, the Constitution's clear now. Who knows? With Donald Trump, you just don't know. The rules change.
Yeah, this was very typical for Sean Hannity, and I don't say that in any sort of negative way. He is, I don't know him, well, I don't know him at all. I've appeared on various Fox programs. I don't think I've appeared on his show, but maybe once or twice. Everyone says he's a very, very nice guy in person. I think I've met him a handful of times. Seems like a very nice guy. He is not someone who wants to, like, behind the scenes fight with people or especially fight with people on the right. He is a sincere believer that the conservative vision is good for America, that Donald Trump is good for America, that Democrats on the left are bad for America. He is laser focused on fighting with the left, on having a show that is, he trains his fire towards Democrats. He doesn't like to do infighting on the right at all. He doesn't, it's exactly like he said there. He clearly disagrees with everything Tucker's doing, but he doesn't want to pick a fight with Tucker or with anyone else in any direction on the right. He cares about getting Republicans, providing rhetorical opinion programming support for conservative audiences, and that's what he does, and that's fine. I respect him for that. Frankly, more people on the right should, if we're going to be effective as a movement, more people on the right should choose that.
Just fall in line with anything
so much
that goes against everything you voted for. Just fall in line.
Okay, there's a lot of infighting.
What, across parties or just
no, on the right?
Oh yeah, and he doesn't want to address the people that are actually holding the administration's feet to the fire from what they campaigned on versus what they're doing. Why is that a bad thing? You always talk about how that's a good thing. No, we're talking about Marjorie Taylor Greene. We're talking about the entire Turning Points convention in Phoenix, how there was a lot of infighting. We're talking about all the things
The
happening.
infighting between Candace Owens and Erica Kirk is not helpful, and it is a grieving widow on one side and an insane person on the other.
You picked out one
people who are
example. I talked about the whole Turning Points event. I'm talking about Tom Tillis talking to Kristi Noem, both Republicans, that were having that argument that we just saw in the Senate. I'm talking about Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's been ostracized from the party for calling for America first. I'm talking about MAGA influencers that are challenging the president on going to war in Iran. There's a lot of infighting that's not Candace Owens and Erica Kirk.
That's not what I meant. I meant the very toxic, media-focused part that's not really about policy, but is about fighting people on things that are crazy, that Candace Owens is participating in, and others who want to, prop her up so they can fight. That's not helpful. Obviously, we're going to disagree about Iran, and we should have conversations.
But Hannity is acting like better than, I don't like to kick people when they're down just on my side. But he'll take every opportunity to try to kick somebody down on a different network that has a view that he calls leftist, but aligns with...
That does make him better.
No, because a lot of people that have maybe a leftist view, particularly, let's say, in the case of Iran, are the same exact views as the people that he doesn't want to kick while they're down that are also saying it within his own party. So he needs to just call out right from right and wrong from wrong if he believes that way. What's the policy that you believe in? It shouldn't be about what the party you want to antagonize. What is the policy?
I wasn't saying he's a...
No, that's what he said, though. He's trying to convince Katie Miller he's above it all. He doesn't do that only for them. It's just petty. What do you mean? Do you talk about policy or do you not? He only wants to go after the left.
On what the true threat to conservatism, the true threat in his view to America is, that it's the Democratic Party, and and if Republicans are going to get elected, be successful, conservatives are going to grow their movement, they have to be focused on that, not always, constantly divisive personal conflicts, the likes of which we're seeing now.
Well, he has to address the elephant in the room, is that there's a clear split within the Conservative Party from establishment versus current people who want to move towards the populism movement. And so if he wants to act like that's not happening, he surely can. But some of those people who are moving towards the populist movement are the same people that were on the fence in the last election, and were even people like Joe Rogan who's interested in people like Bernie Sanders, which should make him very alarmed, because if he really is a champion, like he said, telling you who he's voting for of the conservative movement, then he needs to also understand what the future of Republicanism or conservatism looks like, right? He can't just define it based on the old norms. And that's what he kind of seems like he wants to do. It's just the way that Fox News used to be. I don't like that, Tucker Carlson is doing anything that when he was in this Fox that ran a tight ship. It's all right.
She asked him his opinion. He this is the point. He doesn't spend any of his show or any time whatsoever, not on Twitter or anything he does. He spends zero time going after Tucker. That's just not what he's about. And I think it is helpful to have at least one person in conservative media who mostly talks about his frustration with Democrats. It's beginning to feel like every single other person mostly talks about their frustration with other conservatives. And it's not healthy.
That makes him more noble because he doesn't want to address the actual issues going on within his own party that he loves so much.
I think it's I think it's a good idea for him to do that. I think it's good for some conservatives to spend some time talking about how Democrats are bad. That's all.
It's going to be interesting about what happens to the party after President Trump. It's completely changed. I understand Hannity's perspective on he seems like he's more aligned with the establishment of the party, what it used to be. And I don't know if that still exists after.
The establishment is, Trump took over. The establishment is Trump.
It's really not, though, because no one's sure that Trump lasts after Trump leaves. People are trying to make sure. You just said that Trump has a cabinet full of people that may disagree with him in a variety of ways. What does that look like when Trump's not the figure moving the needle?
Inherits this quite clearly, and J.D. Vance's policies are very similar to Trump's on almost everything. Maybe his slight differences on foreign policy. His economic policies are very similar. His domestic policy is very similar. His views on immigration are very similar.
Well, foreign policy is a huge deal. It's been literally Trump's whole life of
right.
His first year in office.
That's the most interesting thing about all this.
That's crazy.
Behind the scenes, what we hear is that J.D. Vance was not for this.
Venezuela, Iran.
I don't know about Venezuela. That he's not for this in particular, the Iran thing.
Well, their foreign policy is different. That must be a huge issue for somebody like Hannity, who goes on air every day and wants to defend every single
Biden had a different foreign policy from Obama to some extent. I mean, he was not supportive of every foreign policy decision Obama made. He thought, apparently, he thought Libya and Syria interventions were missteps, and Hillary Clinton overruled him on that. And I thought he actually showed some maybe better instincts than other people who were part of the team at that time.
It might be,
then as president,
but
he
maybe
had no
it'll
idea what was
behoove the
going on.
party to define what it actually is, and then people won't be so disgruntled when somebody else campaigns on one thing and then does something else. Like you said, perhaps if Trump would have just said, like, I'm like a traditional conservative in this way that I'd like to push forward in these Middle Eastern territories, then perhaps maybe everyone wouldn't be so alarmed right now, and you would avoid some of this fighting that he doesn't want to see. Tragic news out of Austin this morning. The FBI is investigating a mass shooting, which they deemed a potential terror attack at a bar that resulted in 2 people dying and 14 wounded.
The shooting took place outside a bar called Buford's Backyard Beer Garden just before 2 a.m. in Austin's 6th Street, which is known for its nightlife. The Department of Homeland Security says the gunman has been identified as 53-year-old Ndiaga Jenny. Police say that the gunman was wearing clothes with the words "property of Allah" and with an Iranian flag design. The U.S. and Israel, of course, conducted strikes on Iran over the weekend before the bar shooting took place. Austin's police chief, Lisa Davis, says that the suspect first drove past the bar several times before he stopped and then shot people from his SUV's window. According to Davis, the gunman eventually stepped out of his vehicle with a rifle and fired it at people walking on the street. Terrifying. Police were able to rush to the intersection and then shoot him.
Now, after the shooting, Texas Senate candidate James Talarico said in part, quote, "I believe in the power of prayer. I believe prayer changes lives. I believe prayer changes the world. But there is something profoundly cynical about asking God to solve a problem that we're not willing to solve ourselves." Texas Governor Greg Abbott responded to Talarico on X, writing in part, "The problem here, James, is not the gun show loophole. It's the unvetted immigrant loophole, allowing unvetted immigrants who are hostile to America, who are loyal to our adversaries like Iran, must end."
Both those responses are quite silly, honestly. We don't even know how he obtained the gun, whether it was, so I totally disagree with Talarico that this is some obvious case for gun control. We don't know any details about whether there was something that could have been done to prevent him, crazy person, from doing something bad. So that's stupid to me. Similarly, I looked up his immigration status. He came here on a tourist visa, and then he married a U.S. citizen and got a green card. And so he was, in fact, vetted in some way. And I think most people who are in favor of restricting immigration are not in favor of limiting the marriage rights of U.S. citizens,
Right.
I think. So that, too, would not have solved this problem. In a gigantic country of millions of people, there are crazy people, and we can certainly talk about what things can be done to better monitor the insane people. He, of course, had prior run-ins with law enforcement and, of course, had prior run-ins, concerns about his mental health status, and nothing was done. So let's, scrutinize that a little bit more. But, and if this, it could be that he's a crazy person, but the Iran news, it ties in together and caused him to act out. We should unfortunately expect blowback from Iranian regime-sympathetic crazy people or extremists in our midst, so we should be very vigilant for that. That is an unfortunate consequence of what we're doing that shouldn't deter us if this is still the right course of action, but as I said in my radar, I have yet to see it justified to me, so that's neither here nor there.
I think both Talarico, like you said, we agree on that politicians that jump to conclusions or try to hurry up and respond is the wrong
Here's the
strategy.
solution. We don't even know.
Yeah, so we both are always on the same page for the most part in this instance. I think that it should always start with prayers being with the victims. When I thought about what happens in Austin around this time, so Austin gets extremely humid starting after probably like May, April. So right now is like the time where everybody is outside. And so if you think about the shooting, it happened at an outdoor bar, probably crowded, lots of people out because these are one of the first weekends where the weather's really breaking. You think about something like this happening so tragically, it's again something that we want to protect people from, but it's a tragic situation. And that should be the only thing that politicians should figure out how to solve first. And then arrest the man, kill the man, like whatever the response is going to be, but also figure out how to bring unity in times where there's a lot of family and school students that are going to be traumatized by the instance. And so it's frustrating when we always see these type of attacks to figure out how the policy that you're pushing forth is the first thing or the most important thing in your statement, when really there's a lot of people that are probably in despair right now because of what just happened. And so, so it's a constant battle that politicians have, because Talarico obviously is fighting for his life in this race that's coming up and wants to be relevant. But it's just not, not the time to try to point the finger.